The second sort of the adverb is the past participle. The past participle as an adverb describes the subject-object relationship to focus on the latter part of the interaction with the subject from the perspective of the object, indirectly described by the past participle. The past participle focuses on the latter part to finalize the interaction between the subject and the object in the perspective of the object. Then we can come across the question that the intransitive verb does not describe the interaction from subject to an object because the intransitive describes the subject to start and end the definition of the intransitive verb. The past participle in the clause stated by the perfect tense to describe the experience of the subject describes the subject to respond to a period when the experience of the subject lasts. The past participle functions as an adjective to describe an object or to describe an object indirectly. The past participle originated from the intransitive verb does not describe the with the trait of the objective because there is not an object to get the definition of the past participle that is derived from the intransitive verb. What about the past participle that has the trait of the adverb? The past participle that has the trait of the adverb is applied to describe the experience of the subject. The special point of the clause to describe the experience of a subject is that the subject interacts with a period of time. The period of time is a premise that the subject experiences something. The premise that the subject exists is applied in every experience, condition, or action. Every experience, condition, or action happens on the premise that time flows. Let's think about the intransitive verb sit. The action indicated by the intransitive verb sit seems like that the subject initiates the action without any object, but the premise of the time for the subject to make the action happen is the premise. With the existence of the time, we can figure out that the subject sits the subject starts the action with the cue of time. Understand, the past participle originated from an intransitive verb describes an experience of a subject. In short, the past participle that has the trait of an adjective does not describe an object, but the past participle originated from the intransitive verb describes the interaction between the subject and the period. Thus, the speaker to say the clause in the perfect tense that is about an experience of a subject considers the past participle to specify the relationship between the subject, who is a period, as an object, and the period that becomes a subject to influence the object that is originally the subject as a way of the subject to respond to the influence from the period. Let's think of the situation that we have an experience. When we state about an experience, we have to go through a period of time. For the period of time, we happened an action or we are in a condition. There is a clause, she has. The subject, indicated by the personal pronoun she, retains a period of time. She went through a period of time until the present, when the speaker declares the experience is finished at the present. The intransitive verb has reveals the tense of this clause. The listeners can figure out that the experience of the subject is expired at the present because the speaker declares the end of the experience at the present when the speaker tells this clause. The subject went through the period of time. The subject happened an action indicated by the intransitive verb swim more than once. The experience refers to a condition or an action that happened or happens more than once. For the period, we can think that action happened more than once is the way that the subject responds to the period of time. We respond to the time. We set an alarm, like when the alarm at 9:20 on Sunday, I start to prepare to go to church. This is how we respond to the time. This clause, to describe an experience of the subject, describes the way the subject responds to the period of time with an action indicated by the intransitive verb swim more than once. The subject has a period of time. The speaker knows the starting point and the ending point of time is the time when the speaker declares that the experience finishes. With the form of the verb has, we can know that the experience of the subject finishes at the present. What does she have? What does the subject have? A period of time. The subject has a period of time. Then what is the past participle? That's the way that the subject responds to the flow of time. The subject interacts with the period of time. We can understand that the object of interaction stated in the clause is not visualized, like it's not indicated, but we can notice that the subject interacts with a period of time. The past participle describes the subject responds to the period. The subject has a period. The period of time becomes an object. The object is declared by the speaker. Then the period is the subject that gives us an influence. Then the subject, who is indicated by the personal pronoun she, responds to the subject, that is the period. The subject and the object switch it. This past participle is the result. The subject becomes the object, responds to the period as the period is not indicated in the clause because the period is the premise for the existence of the subject. We can notice that a clause stated in the perfect tense sets a premise that the object that the subject has is a period of time, that the subject retains the experience. This clause describes the experience that the subject, who is a female and not a participant in the conversation, has from the point in the past when the speaker considers that the experience of the subject starts, to the point at the present when the speaker declares the completion of the experience that the subject has. The form of the intransitive verb has, the time when the speaker declares the completion of the experience. And the past participle describes the definition of the intransitive verb has, because the past participle describes how the subject responds to the period. So the past participle as an adverb describes the definition of the intransitive verb has. The reason why the speaker who states a clause in the perfect tense describes that the subject has the experience with the intransitive verb have is that the speaker retains the experience until the speaker declares the completion of the experience. When we tell our experience to the listeners, we have the experience as a memory. At the time when we say to the listeners the experience the speaker describes the experience of the subject with the way to happen an action indicated by the past participle that originated from the intransitive verb swim more than once for the period that the experience lasts. Without the indication in the clause, there is the primary agreement that every experience, condition, or action of the subject happens on the premise that the time goes. The experience, condition, or action of a subject described by the intransitive verb also happens on the premise that the time goes. The past participle that originated from the intransitive verb is applied in the perfect tense. The past participle is an adverb to describe the experience of the subject is applied in a clause because the condition or the action able to happen on the premise that the subject exists on the period of time. There is a clause, he sit. The past participle sit that originated from the intransitive verb sit indicates the way that the subject influenced from the period unilaterally responds to the period that is not indicated in the clause, but we have to notice that the time goes when the experience of the subject